What is up, YouTube? I have stumbled on some potentially awesome gear news that I want to share with you guys. As some of you guys may know, I dabble a little bit in audio plugin development and nothing too hardcore. I don't have any sort of big plugins on the market or anything like that. I just sort of mess around, and I was watching some videos of ADC 2017, which is sort of the audio developer convention, and I stumbled upon some pretty awesome news. At first I was just listening and I kind of didn't take things in until I watched it again and heard the guys' names being mentioned, and then I suddenly realized what I was actually watching.
So the question is, can we show pictures of what we're working on? No. Nope.
Unfortunately not. That's pre-release, so we can only talk about our work. We can't actually show it.
Yeah.
It was two of the head guys at Moog synthesizers talking about a new secret product that they're developing, and I kind of got a couple of hints and a little bit of information out of the video, and I'm going to share it with you guys. First things first, I just want to say this isn't a sort of huge hardware spoiler to stuff that's coming out. This is purely speculation, but I'm going to show you guys why I speculated on certain of these features, and I'm going to show you guys a couple of the clips from the video so you can sort of see what I see. So the idea with their secret product is a pretty revolutionary thing for the guys at Moog synthesizer, because it seems like the hardware unit is built around a software development system. And the reason I say that is because obviously the ADC convention is a convention for audio plugin developers, you know. The whole convention revolves around a platform called Juice, which if you guys aren't too familiar with it and you are wanting to sort of develop some plugins and get into that sort of thing, you should totally check it out. So the idea is they were just explaining how they implemented the Juice framework into this new secret product that they're developing. And they didn't give away too much specs about the product, but I was able to sort of decode some of that information, and I'm going to share that with you guys. So they did mention that the product has a central LCD user interface, which is obviously going to be the sort of display for your waveforms and your envelopes and your LFOs and maybe your sequencer and your ARP and stuff like that.
So very quickly, we can't tell you about this product. So it's got a central LCD. It's got a front panel that has hardware controls.
They did mention that their main focus was to sort of incorporate the LCD interface alongside hardware interface as sort of one complete fluid system, so that it didn't feel like the sort of hardware was controlling a digital system. It felt like one complete instrument, which I think is very interesting and a very bold step to take. And I think the guys at Moog Synth can definitely pull this off.
You know, my role is essentially the hardware and UI design and specifying the product as the user interacts with it.
So they talk about the hardware controls, and they mention the fact that the controls that are going to be used the most, like oscillator tuning, or you know, your filter settings, your LFO settings and stuff like that, are going to be represented as hardware controls on the surface. But I'm sure what they're going to also do is maybe implement some sort of macro control system in which you can map hardware controls to different functions in the digital realm, which could be quite exciting.
At Moog, we call them hard versus soft controls, and you know, hardware controls are your fixed purpose controls. If you're making a musical instrument, you may have keys, you may have dedicated buttons that only have one function, and when you're designing a system, you want to try to offload those things that are you know, the highest frequency, the things that you need to use the most often, the most repeatedly, the quickest response time. Ideally, you don't want to put those in your GUI, because you want to be able to get to them more quickly than that, and you want the fluidity of the use of this thing to support that. So things that you need immediate access to, things that you need to use very often, functions that you need to perform very often on the instrument, you want to try to take those out of your LCD GUI and give them physical controls.
So they also spoke about the Native Instruments Machina and the Ableton Push 2, and they spoke about the colorful LED pads representing what's going on in the digital realm in terms of Ableton or in terms of the Machina software. And they did mention how they're planning to somehow incorporate that into this instrument?
This is a common language that's used. This is a Machinist Studio and a push-to controller, and in both cases you've got your rich immersive GUI with some buttons that might have some multicolored, ideally they're multicolored LEDs, and then you've got some encoders that probably if you push them there's probably a switch there also, and all of these, this is sort of the common design language of what are the generic controls that work best next to an LCD. And as you see on the LCD, your visual elements, they're lined up sort of on a grid with the physical controls, so you know, aha, the data that is showing above this knob is what's going to change when I turn the knob.
So they mentioned that the system will be running on Linux using the Juice framework, as I mentioned before. And they mentioned also that it's going to be run on a system on a module. One of the strengths of the system that they're using is that they've got a lot of memory. Their kind of main processes in terms of the system are going to be put towards memory, you know, like maybe loading samples, or I'm hoping that it could be something to do with a wavetable synthesizer, as opposed to sort of live CPU usage, you know, which could be a very interesting system coming from Moog, who are renowned for their sort of completely analog systems.
It runs Linux at its core, on which Juice is being run to actually display an interface on the LCD. So another approach, and this is really dependent on the resources you have in your system. So we found that within the constraints of what we had to work with, what we had the most available was memory. So that's something to use and to leverage. One of the biggest advantages that you can do with memory is to do as much work up front, so that when the user wants to do an action, that everything is just snappy and immediately there. You don't have to instantiate things.
So they also spoke about the fact that they've already developed a GUI editor that they're using to control the system that they're building for the Linux system on a module. That kind of pushes me to believe that with the hardware instrument that they're obviously going to release, there's going to be some sort of editor or software editor just to make sort of patch loading, automation, anything within the DAW so much easier.
Is the use of a virtual panel. This is the idea is we have one team of people that are designing the GUI in Juice, as we've been talking about. And then we have, of course, this is embedded in a hardware product. That means there's a hardware development team. They're working on the actual system that this front panel is embedded in. That's going to be something that is scanning all of your front panel knobs and switches and all the other inputs that are being processed by the system and that are ultimately responsible for the things that Geert was saying, like, okay, we're changing an LFO rate with a dedicated knob, and that's going to flow into our GUI, and if you happen to be looking at the LFO, it's going to be drawing a picture and updating a text value and so on and so forth. A simulated hardware UI on your development system, you know, it's got a picture, basically it's like a plug-in GUI, essentially, of what your hardware front panel will be. And it can send the exact same messages to your GUI application that the hardware will send when it's ready. And so this is something that we developed for our product. We created a graphical front panel that was, you could control it with the mouse, you could control it with keyboard shortcuts, and it would generate the exact same messages that, you know, that our API was set up to receive. So turning your virtual front panel knobs would communicate. You know, we were using OSC messages, found that, and another really good thing about that is if you're collaborating with people over a distance, we have a distributed team, so the people that are working on the hardware on one continent, and Geert is working on the front end on another continent.
Then they also mentioned the fact that all the components that they're building, sort of the oscillator, the mod matrix and all this stuff, will be sort of designed within a modular system. And what I get from that is that they're developing a system on which they can build further. So I don't think we're going to see just one product. I think we're going to see a line of products, you know, maybe a sort of small single voice analog synth with completely digital controls and touch panel or something like that, and then maybe bigger versions of 4-voice and 8-voice, stuff like that.
I would say it is reusable. It is designed, you know, it's modular, it's componentized, and it's, you know, as it's implemented in Juice, just as each component and widget is very reusable in different contexts within that given project, those same, you know, widgets and the design language they represent certainly could be reusable across subsequent products, that's a marketing decision whether or not to actually do that. But from a technological point of view, it would be extremely easy to reuse, you know, those styles and those elements in a different configuration to create some future iteration or some further sibling product as well.
And technically, we definitely take it into account, so to make it possible if that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm super excited to see what actually comes of this, and let me know in the comments if you guys think my speculation is just, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. See you guys next time.
You know, in a perfect world, someone says, hey, I want to be able to modulate every possible thing.